You are welcome everyone to another video tutorial. Today we want to look at the UseEffect hooks. In the last class we looked at the useState hooks, and we looked at another hooks called useEffects. UseEffects is the second most commonly used hooks after the useState hook. The UseEffect hook lets you perform side effects in functional components. Now, side effects are actions which are performed with the outside world. Now, when we say side effects, we're looking at things that are done beyond our React components. Things like fetching data from an external server, setting time constraint like set timeouts and set time interval. Those things that are not really done inside the React components are what we call side effects. Don't worry, you get to understand it better as we progress. We can perform side effects when we need to reach outside of our React components to do something. So what are the commonly used side effects? So some common side effects are fetching data from API, updating the DOM documents and windows, timer functionality. To perform any side effect, you will need a UseEffect hook. So for me to perform any of these side effects, I'm going to need what? A UseEffect hook. So let us look at what the UseEffect hook brings to the table. So we'll go to our VS Code. So this is my hook. So I'm going to take away every of these hook out and start all over. So here I'll generate my boilerplates. So it's similar to useState, the way we create the UseEffect. So the first thing, I'm going to create a state. I'll create a counter to use that to illustrate to you how the UseEffect works. So here I'll say create a use state for counter. So I'll create a use state for counter. I'll say cons. I'll call this counter. Then this will be set counter. I want to use this to illustrate the use states. To a use state, and we'll give it a number of 0. It is imported already. So this one is a use state I've just created. So I come here, put some buttons, some buttons that will change the states. So let me just come here and just put button. I'll call this add number or add. Then I'll duplicate this multiple times so that I won't waste time typing. I'll call this reset. Then I'll call this subtract or sub. Okay, that's just again. Here I'll put an h1 and I'll say call this counter. So I'm just creating, I'm not doing styling here. I just want to just show you the functionalities. Now this will give me counter. What is the value of counter? 0. Yeah, this is the value of counter. So if I save this and go to my screen, I should be seeing this on the screen. So let me zoom my screen so I can see that better. Okay. So let me just come here and just put it at the center. Let me just leave it. So the next thing I want to do is to put an on-click functionality here, so that when I click on the button, on the add button, this state will change. I click on reset button, this state will change. And I click on the sub button, this state will change. So I'm not interested in the styling for now. Just come here and I'll put an on-click event. I'm going to also teach you on-click event. Call this add. I'll do the same thing for the other buttons. On click, call this reset. I'll do the same thing for sub. I'll call this sub. Now I have 3 functions to create. That's what it means. So here I'll comment this. Let me put this down so you can see that. So I'll say create a function to add, reset, and subtract. So the first function is add. I'll create an arrow function. And I said something there in our UseState class. I said that what if you want to update a variable, this is a variable called counter, you use what the set counter. So yeah, I'll say set counter equal to what? Counter. Counter is 0. I'll say counter plus 1. Sorry, plus 1. Because the value of counter is 0. So I can say counter plus 1, which will give me 1. Or I can come here and say counter plus plus, which will keep incrementing. So no problem about that. I'll move on. Or I can just do it this way and do it in a shorter way. I can come here and say let's count equal to counter plus plus. Then in this place will now be count. You can do this to anyone. It's a choice. It's a choice actually. Count. So the value of counter is what? Count. So let's first see. Okay, let's continue doing. Let's do the one for reset. So I'll come here and say const reset. I'll reset it back to 0. That's what reset is. So another function. So yeah, I'll say set counter to 0. I want it to go back to the initial state, which is 0. That's for reset. The other one is subtract. So I'll come here and say const sub equal to. So this one will be the negative minus. I'll come here and just put this. Turn this to minus. I'll save this. So let's see if this is actually working. Oh, sorry, that was an error. Assignment to constant variable. Sorry about that. So I'll come here and take this guy out. So we will need this actually. So yeah, I'll just come here and increment counter directly. So I'll say counter plus 1. Then this one, I'll take this guy out. I'll say counter minus 1. Counter minus 1. I'll save that. Okay, so I'll go to my browser. I tried it again. So you can see it's increasing by 1. So when I click on subtract, it will decrease it. When I click on reset, it goes back to 0. So while this is working, our counter is working already. So you can see minus 3 keep increasing by 1. So I'm going to open my console so that we can look at what the UseEffect brings to the table. Okay. So let me increase it so 100 so I can see that clearly. So this is my console. I click on the console. I clean everything off the console. Now, one of the rules for, let me create a UseEffect before I give you the rules for UseEffect. Or let me give you the rules. Now, UseEffect, every time the page loads or renders, UseEffect is triggered. That means whenever this page loads or renders, this UseEffect will be triggered. That's one of the rule number 1. When the state changes, that means when this state, this is a state called 0. When the state changes, UseEffect will run again. So the conditions for UseEffect to run now is whenever the page loads or renders, UseEffect will run. Then whenever the state changes, let's say the state changes from 0 to 1 or 0 to 7 or whatever, UseEffect will run. That's the condition we want you to put at the back of your mind. So let's create our UseEffect. So since we've gotten this, I'm going to create a UseEffect here. I'll say create a UseEffect. I want to use this to illustrate to you the UseEffect now. So how do you create a UseEffect? It's similar to that. UseEffect takes in what? 2 arguments, which I showed you on the PowerPoint slide. It takes 2 arguments. The first argument is what? The function. Then later we can put our dependency array later, not now. So I'll create a UseEffect and make sure it is imported. UseEffect. You can see it is imported from React. I see that UseEffect. So this is UseEffect. It takes in a function. This is what I mean. It takes in a function and a dependency array. But for now, I'll leave the dependency array out. It takes in a function. So I'll put all the function. So I'm going to use arrow function. That's the UseEffect. So here I can easily come here and say console.log. I want to show on the console.log. Let me just put UseEffect triggers, UseEffect triggered. Okay. Now we say something that UseEffect will trigger when the page loads or when the page renders. That's when UseEffect will trigger or run. And again, UseEffect will run or triggers when the state changes. So I'll save this now. So let's go to our browser. What do you see? UseEffect triggered. So when the page loads, it triggers, and when the page loads, you can see it twice. It triggers twice here, at initial render and also when the page renders or loads. So let me take this again. So I'm going to refresh the browser. You see what will happen when I refresh the browser. You know, I told you that what UseEffect will run or trigger whenever the browser is renders or loads or refreshes. So I refresh the browser. You can see UseEffect is triggered. I hope you're getting that. So if I want to allow or make UseEffect triggers or runs again, I will likely change the states. So once the state is changed, UseEffect also triggers. So I will change the state from 0 to 1 now by clicking on this button called add. What do you observe? UseEffect has been triggered. You can see that. If I change the state again, what will happen? You can see that it has triggered again. UseEffect has been triggered. So if I keep changing the states, UseEffect will keep render. You can see it's 2. Click it again, it's not to 3. You can see that for yourself. So these are the conditions that UseEffect will, one of the few conditions. But I know you're done with the conditions. Since you've gotten this, you know that when the page loads, UseEffect will be triggered, either at initial render or when the page refreshes or loads. And when the state changes, UseEffect will be triggered. So another concept of UseEffect is that the first time the page renders, which you have seen already, you have to use the dependency array. It tells UseEffect to run only once at initial renders. So if you remember, let me take away everything. Let me show you something. When I refresh this, I want to get twice UseEffect triggers, because every time the page loads or renders, UseEffect will always at initial render it's going to trigger, and when the page loads, if I refresh this, I'll get 2 UseEffect loads triggered. You can see it twice. The first one, once the page is renders at initial, UseEffect is triggered. Second one is when the page loads, UseEffect is triggered. So there's what is called a dependency array. If you don't want it to render to trigger or to run twice, you just want it to run at initial render, you use the dependency array. So what then is the dependency array? It's just an empty array that stops UseEffect from rendering more than once. So if I want my UseEffect to render only once, I will use the dependency array. Dependency array is an empty array. So I'll come here, I'll put a comma here. Inside this UseEffect, I'll put a comma here, and I'll put an empty array. This empty array is called a dependency array. So this dependency array will make UseEffect to trigger only once. That means that once is at initial render. It soon rendered or runs twice. So I save this. I go to the browser now. So let me take these guys out. So if I refresh this now, I won't see that UseEffect triggers twice. I only see it at once at initial render. I refresh the browser. Oh, that didn't really work out well. Why? I thought I was. Oh, why? Sorry, that didn't. Let me save it again and try. Let me try. So, it's working. Yeah, it's working. So let me show you again. At initial render, it's going to give me these 2. If I refresh the browser again, I won't see UseEffect triggers. Let me refresh the browser so you can see that. So you can see I'm not getting UseEffect triggers again. It only brought UseEffect triggered at initial render. So initial refresh or render that's the only time you see UseEffect triggered. If I refresh, I won't see any other UseEffect triggers. You can see that UseEffect was triggered only at initial renders, only at when it's initially loaded or refreshes. That was when UseEffect was triggered, because we inserted a dependency array. In the first part, we didn't insert a dependency array. You can see that whenever I refresh the browser, UseEffect keep running. But if you want it to only run once, you need to insert the dependency array. So I hope you understand the dependency array now. So for the dependency array, if you want UseEffect to run just once at initial render, use the dependency array as an argument here. So when a state or props change, UseEffect will run. So I've showed you that earlier. Whenever the state changes, whenever a state or props changes, UseEffect will run. So let me come here. So I'll put this counter. This is a state, a variable. I'll put it inside this dependency array counter. I'll save this. I'll go to my browser. Let me take this guy out first. So I refresh this. Okay. So remember, we've started a counter inside the dependency array. So that means that whenever the counter, this 0 changes to any number, UseEffect will be triggered. So I'll come here and click on add. You can see it's triggered. Click on subtract. You can see UseEffect is triggered. Click on reset. You can see that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see it's rendering. So that means at any time the state changes or the props changes, UseEffect will run. That is what I've just done. So I believe you understand the concept of UseEffect, because it will come in handy when you are trying to do side effect like fetching data from an external server, setting timeouts and time intervals in functionalities. You will need it a lot. So thanks very much. As videos getting lengthy, I'll see you guys in the next class.